to the fourth dimension.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Triumph Over Lockdown. This is episode 8. So great to have you here. Don't forget to share this out. We've got some great information for you today. Share it out, please. Tag your friends. Please, you're welcome to put comments in. Let's get some interaction going here. Wonderful to have you here. And we're going to be talking about thoughts today and how we relate to them. It's very interesting, and I think we can really get some benefit out of this. Another thing to remember is the relationship between our mental state, our mental fitness, and our physical fitness. A lot of people separate it. Oh yeah, that's physical, that's mental. But one of the things that we really need to take into consideration is we're a whole person. And this is something that for centuries, medicine actually separated. They tended not to deal very much with what happened mentally and just dealt with physical issues. This, of course, is something that's changing, and it's a good change to have, where we're dealing with the whole person. And that means that our physical state can really influence our emotional and mental state, and our mental and emotional state can really influence our physical state. And this is something, this connection that really needs to be made. That means, therefore, that we need to take care of ourselves physically if we want to have a good mental fitness, if we want to have a good emotional regulation. Then taking care of ourselves physically is really important. And that means good nutrition, good sleep, exercise, food intake. This is really, really important. And so always I say to any of my clients, if they're starting to feel a little bit emotionally upset, if there's something in their mental awareness that's beginning to disturb them, one of the first points of checking is at the doctors to get a full blood scan, to understand if there's any infections, if there's anything going on inside. When we have physical medical ailments, it can really affect our emotional state, it can affect our mental state, when we start to feel it in our body. So it's really important that, I can't even stress it more, that we have regular medical checkups, especially if we're beginning to feel some sort of anxiety coming on, depression coming on. If it's something that's chronic and it's been going on for a long time, and you've been to the doctor and it's all checked out, very good. If not, if something acute, something's just started, it's always a good idea not to go to the doctor from the point of view of saying, I'm depressed, I want some antidepressants, but going and explaining those physical, descriptive situation that you're in, that you're having some sort of stomach pains or some sort of sensations in your body and so on. And this is something that I'm not just mentioning for the sake of it. It's really relevant to today's lesson. And today's lesson is about how we relate to language. Our thoughts are all about language. And sometimes we can have descriptive language, and sometimes we can have evaluative language. And that's the same with our thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts are descriptive thoughts, and sometimes our thoughts are evaluative thoughts. And a lot of the time we don't know how to distinguish that. And when we don't know how to distinguish that, it can get us sometimes into a little bit of trouble. And so today's lesson is going to be about that. So before we start, we've got Joyce agreeing with us, which is fantastic, and also saying that she's glad to hear this. Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be doing a little bit of exercising on that today, because it's really important that we learn about that. Because when our brain is basically a thought-generating machine, if you like, and it's churning out thoughts all the time. And it's really important from our point of view that we begin to distinguish whether they are descriptive, okay, and we'll get to learn what that means, or whether they're evaluative, or whether they're comparative, and we'll see how all these things link up with each other. Okay, so are we ready to get into part one? Here we go. Okay, well, as usual, we're going to start off with our breathing. So, ready, using our tummies, breathing in through our nose and out through our mouth, as if we're breathing in the scent of a beautiful flower, and breathing out in order to blow out candle. Breathing in, holding, and breathing out. Breathing out very slowly at the count of 5, letting go as we do. Breathing in, holding that, and breathing out. Halfway there, breathing in, holding, and breathing out. Just let go. Final time for this lesson, breathing in, holding, really deep breath, and out. Just letting go. That's it. Just let that oxygen marinate right around your brain and body. Wonderful. If you want to tell us how that experience was, you can write it in the comments. Please share this out if you can. With any groups that you're a member of, share this out. We've got some wonderful information now. Okay, so thoughts are getting churned out all the time by our brain. Thousands and thousands and thousands of thoughts per day. Sometimes we don't even realize they're there. And thoughts can come in the form of words, in the form of that inner voice. They can come in the form of memories and pictures and all sorts of images. And it's, all these things together we call language. Language and pictures, language as images, language and thoughts, languages and sounds, everything that your brain is churning out for you. And sometimes these thoughts are not so comfortable. Sometimes they're quite intrusive. And sometimes they keep going round and round and round again. And we've got to learn how to manage that. A lot of the time what happens is people try to, get rid of those thoughts. I don't want to hear them, try to la 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 kind of thing, maybe put music on, I don't want to hear my thoughts. And that might work for a very short period of time. But at the end of the day, they're all going to start generating again. Or sometimes we try to numb them out. Give me some antidepressants, give me some sleeping pills, give me some of this, maybe alcohol, smoking cigarettes. Just get rid of those thoughts. Unfortunately, and here's the bad news, unfortunately, if we've got working brains, we're going to have thoughts being churned out all the time. Sometimes these thoughts will be pleasant, sometimes they'll be neutral, sometimes they will be very uncomfortable, and sometimes painful. What we are learning is how to manage that. We are learning how to surf that, because what happens with thoughts is that they come into our head, they hang around for a certain amount of time, and then they will move out again. And if we can learn to surf that wave of thought, if we can learn to be willing to have that thought until it leaves us, we're going to be in a much better situation. And when we're in a better situation, meaning that we'll be able to cope with that, we'll be able to learn how to do that, the quality of our life is going to go up. Because we're not going to be using all our time and energy and focus fighting or trying to run away from those thoughts. But it's important to learn about thoughts and what they are. Some of our thoughts are really descriptive, and some of our thoughts are evaluative, and sometimes we don't actually know how to tell the difference. So, what's the difference between description and evaluation? Look in front of you for an object. I've got this table, for instance, in front of me. Whatever you can find in front of you. And let's describe it. So, I'm going to describe this table is, it's about 4 feet long, this table. It's made of wood. It's got a brown wood color. It's quite solid. And it's made with a kind of a fancy design at the edges. It's kind of a stepped design towards the end. I can see on the surface of this table, the surface of this table has that natural wooden pattern to it. I can see that the table has been varnished and that it has little nicks in it here and there. Okay, so that's me describing the table. Now, if I wanted to be evaluative about the table, I could say, well, the table is medium size. It looks to me a little bit kind of not very nice table. I did like it at the beginning, but now not so much. In fact, sometimes the table really annoys me. Other things about this table is that, it's useful sometimes, I put stuff on it and I find it, sometimes it's a bit of a useful table. All right. So these are evaluative thoughts about the table. Okay. So we see the difference. We have sometimes descriptive thoughts, and descriptive thoughts are thoughts that we can describe something using our 5 senses. So we can describe something using our eyes, or our ears, our nose, a sense of smell, sense of taste, and sense of touch. These are descriptive thoughts. Okay? Evaluative thoughts are thoughts that are subjective to me, and they're a bit of a story, right? They're a bit of my own evaluation. They're nothing to do with the intrinsic qualities of the object that I am evaluating, okay? Descriptive thoughts are intrinsic to the actual object, and my evaluations are not. These are my subjective evaluations of the object. All right, now I'm going to show you a different one, for instance. Let's up the ranks on this. So I have a big object and a small object, okay? So if you're in the UK, you'll recognize this object as a 2p coin, and this object is a 20p coin, okay? That's what they're called. These are evaluative names. But if I was to describe this coin descriptively, so I would say it's a round piece of metal, it's a copper color, it has on it all sorts of engravings, including the Queen's head engraving image. On the other side, it's got all sorts of fancy different designs on it. And it's got some letters around the edge, including the Queen's name, Elizabeth. Okay, if I take this coin, so this is a coin that's got 6 edges to it, I think. It's a silver color, and it's got an engraving on the back of crown, and on the front, or on this other side rather, it's got an engraving again of the Queen's head, and the Queen's head is looking from, she's looking in left to right, if you like. Okay, so now I have 2 coins. This coin is bigger than this coin. So if I was to ask a small child, which coin is bigger? right? They would say this coin is bigger. So if I was to say to a small child, what coin do you want? The bigger coin or the smaller coin? So he would say, I want the bigger coin. There you go. Because generally speaking, we want things that are bigger than small things. Don't know why. Now comes an adult, and he looks at these two pieces of metal, and he says, okay, this piece of metal might be bigger than this piece of metal, descriptive, but we're going to make up a story. We're going to make up an evaluation story, and that is that this small silver one is going to be worth much more than this bigger copper one. In fact, it's going to be 10 times more value than this one. Now, that's just made up. That's just, an agreed idea. It's not intrinsic to the coins. The intrinsic value of the coins is this one is actually bigger than this one. The evaluative idea that we put is this one is worth more than this one. So if you're a small child, you might tend to go for this one. But if you're an adult and understand the evaluative value, you're going to possibly have this one. All right? And especially if I multiplied it by maybe 10 million times, you'd say, you know what, I'll take the smaller ones, 10 million, rather than the bigger ones. Right? Okay. Similar with this set. So we have a big 50 pence coin and a smaller coin, which is worth double this. Again, this is bigger, this is smaller, but this is only worth double this. Why? Because we made that up, right? Okay, so it's important to understand that our thoughts are similar. Some of our thoughts are descriptive, and some of our thoughts are evaluative. And some of our thoughts, when we have that evaluation and comparison, this is bigger than this is valued more than this. Just remember, when we're comparing, are we comparing intrinsic values or are we comparing evaluative values, which are kind of just kind of made up, aren't they? They're not even. It's just a general kind of agreement that we make up together. All right. So sometimes we have thoughts like that. I'm that person over there. They're better than me. Is that descriptive, or is that evaluative? Now, the thing with evaluative thoughts are sometimes they kind of disguise themselves a little bit as descriptive. So we've got to be very careful. Better than me, when we ask, is better an intrinsic value of that person, or is it just me comparing myself? Is it just me evaluating that? All right. Now, we've got to remember that descriptive thoughts are with our five senses, and they're intrinsic to the person or the object or the thought that we're talking about. I have a thought that I have a kind of a butterfly sensation in my body. I have a thought that I have a pain in my arm. Okay. My evaluative thought might be, oh, I've got anxiety. That's not a good thing. Oh, I've got a pain in my shoulder. That must mean that it's come because I didn't do this, or I had an argument. We start to evaluate it. So that's what I meant at the beginning when we go to the doctor. Sometimes it's important to be descriptive, first of all, and he might then ask what your evaluation is. But if we start off with evaluations, we're giving a very subjective view rather than an objective description of what's going on. And that's really, really important. So let's go and see what comments are coming in. So Joyce again is saying that, she needed to hear this. Mitch is coming in saying, it would also seem then that the value of the coin or paper money may be worth more to you than the item it can purchase, vice versa. Absolutely. If they're a value, thank you, Mitch, for that. That's great. If it's evaluative, and that's what money is all about evaluative. The pound or the dollar or whatever it is in paper money is actually just a piece of paper. Okay, there's in the old days it used to be equivalent to some pieces of gold that were stored away somewhere, but that's kind of gone away now. But basically, that piece of paper is a piece of paper. The value of it is what you can get for it, but it's nothing to do with the value of the actual paper. Okay, the actual paper has a value as a piece of paper. If I can get some object for it, then the value of that goes up. So it's all evaluative. It's not descriptive about the actual piece of paper. So you're absolutely right. The value of a coin or a paper money might be worth more to me than it is to you. And certainly you might be able to get more for it if you're a better negotiator than me. And so the value would change. Kim's coming in saying, I think we need to focus our frustrations on China and demand financial compensation. Then we can afford all sorts of help to everyone. But why should we pay? So there you go. So Kim has a thought coming in, and that's great. And he even precedes it with, think. So that's a great way to observe our thoughts by saying, I am having a thought that we need to focus our frustrations on China, etc. So if that thought was kind of coming in and being, ruminating on that thought might be causing frustration. That might be, setting off that emergency system in the body. And rather than looking at the content of the thought here is not relevant to the actual intrinsic qualities of the thought, which is they're just a thought. Okay, the evaluation is what Kim actually thinks about the thought that he's having, and then he can choose whether he wants to act on that thought or let it be. Because a lot of the time when the thought comes in, and it's quite a powerful thought, we don't take that time to step back for a minute, observe the thought, and then choose, do we want to act on the thought or not? What happens is that we get hooked into that thought. The frustration we start to feel in our body, and we start to get swept away by that thought. And that is when we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble, because we're being swept away in our behavior according to the language that our brain is producing for us. And that is where it can get a little bit dodgy in our well-being. Okay, so one of the things to practice then is just sitting and observing our thoughts and just understanding, is this thought coming in descriptive, or is this an evaluation that I'm making? Mitch again's coming back. Interesting how quickly a thought as an observation can quickly turn into a judgment. Absolutely spot on, Mitch. So again, that judgment is an evaluation of the language rather than a description that we can actually use our five senses for. So the distinguishing these descriptive thoughts from our evaluative thoughts is not an easy process. If it was easy, then we would all be doing it. The idea is that this takes practice. Is this thought descriptive, intrinsic to the actual thought, or is it evaluative? Am I making evaluation? And judgment, of course, is an evaluation. So absolutely. And it can change very quickly. In fact, it can change so quickly that we don't realize even that we're making a judgment rather than an evaluation. So we're making a judgment thinking it's descriptive when that judgment is really evaluative. And that's really important to remember. Okay, so wonderful, participation today, and that's really what it's all about. So I've got, regarding that idea of keeping our physical condition really healthy as part of that mental condition, because it's, as one human being, it's really important to take care of both of them simultaneously at this, keep them going both, because they're both very influential on each other. What I do at this point in my day is I go and make myself some ketones and keep myself as fit as possible and get ready for going out on my walk later. And so I found a really interesting video on ketones and exercise that I think might be interesting for you. And after we come back, we can carry on with our discussion. In the meantime, I'm going to mix myself up some ketones. See you in a couple of minutes.
Say you're on a ketogenic diet, say you're taking ketones, right? There's other things involved, like exercise. One of the biggest things we do in exercise is cardio, right? When we diet. A lot of people will just say, well, I'm just dieting. One of my friends just got married, and when he was getting ready for his wedding, he was doing a bunch of cardio. He's like, I just want to lose weight. And I said, are you lifting weights? He said, no, not really. I just want to lose weight. Of course, I saw him just like 2 weeks ago, and what happened? He kind of regained everything. Why? Well, first off, people think that it's very simple. If calories out are greater than calories in, we lose weight, right? It's that simple. I wish it were just that simple, but it's not. The calorie equation is important, but it's not everything. Why? Because when we do cardio or when we diet, we affect muscle and metabolism. And so this is a study where they looked at what happened to metabolism when you lifted weights. Metabolism goes up. When you just do cardio, metabolism goes down. But if you add weights to that, your metabolism goes up. So the point is, you can't just rely on cardio. You need to do cardio and weights, because muscle is a critical tissue. So the next question is, well, what type of cardio should I do? There's a ton of cardio out there. What's the best if I want to burn fat? And this is a lab that we work with, Brian, Chris, and Prove It, to do the research that you guys are seeing, right? So we're in the lab every single day looking at the impact of Prove It's exogenous ketones on performance, on body composition. What's the lesson that we can take home from this, right? What you want to do is interval training. One way to do it is you can walk and sprint, or you could cycle and sprint. Anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes of going low intensity, maybe for a minute, and then all out. Another way that you can do it is if you can mimic this Wingate bike. You take your partner, you go on a spin bike, okay? You have no resistance on there. You pedal all out for about 10 seconds. Your partner cranks the resistance up immediately to a weight that's too hard to move without momentum, and you pedal anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds for 4 to 10 reps with 2 minutes rest between reps. In our lab, we found tremendous fat loss and muscle growth. So basically, when you're sprinting all the way out, you're losing the most fat, and you're looking more lean.
Okay, welcome back to Triumph Over Lockdown. This is episode 8, and l'chaim to you. So we've had some comments coming in, and Joyce says it may help to just describe things instead of evaluating or analyzing. Okay, Joyce, so good point. It may help. The important thing here is to make that distinguishing, between the description, thoughts, and evaluating ones. Sometimes it's important to evaluate. We're evaluating all the time. We can't stop evaluating, and we can't stop describing. This is the way our thoughts are. What we need to do is to use that really intelligent part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex that can make decisions, and we can look at the types of thoughts that are coming in, and then decide what we want to do with them. So that's the really important thing. We can't stop them, and we can't, say, okay, I'm only going to have descriptive thoughts and not evaluative ones. We've got to understand that these thoughts are being put out for our benefit. They're kind of advising thoughts that our brain is putting out. And our job is basically to decide, is this a useful thought? Or is this a thought that I can do without right now? So if it's an evaluative thought, we can say, okay, what is this evaluation going on here? If I'm crossing a road and my mind's evaluating if there's cars coming or not, that's the descriptive thought. A car is coming, and then it evaluates, am I going to be able to cross the road in time before that car reaches the point that I'm in? That's an important evaluation, okay? Sometimes, unfortunately, I get it wrong, but generally speaking, we train our minds to evaluate that correctly. But sometimes it's important not to make that evaluation and judgment, all right? So we need to learn, first of all, to distinguish what kind of thought is coming in, and then do we want to have that thought and take it on board, or do we want to just leave it behind? So that's great. Thank you very much for that, Joyce. All right, so that's it for today. We were talking about how to evaluate our thoughts. Joyce is coming in saying, I tend to ruminate, so need to make good decisions about what to pay. Absolutely. Yesterday's show was about paying attention to what we're paying attention to, and that's exactly right. Joyce, rumination can go on all the time, and we can eventually get out of that ruminating state, Joyce. I can tell you I was a super ruminator. But when we start learning not to focus in on the content too much of our thoughts, but the fact that we're just having thoughts, and then just kind of slightly go over them just as they're coming in and saying, is this a thought that is a descriptive thought or a evaluative thought? And then the next thing would be, is this thought useful for me? Or do I just want to let that one go this time? Sometimes they might be useful. Sometimes they won't. A lot of the time with ruminating, and might happen to you, it certainly happened to me, is that we start evaluating the ruminating and we start justifying it and saying, oh, I'm ruminating because the more I ruminate over it, eventually I will find a solution. And that's the kind of evaluation, the kind of story that we tell ourselves, which keeps that rumination going. And eventually we realize that it doesn't really work. And so we need to step back from that story and say, okay, rumination is the fact I'm just having thoughts. And let's maybe it's not a good thing to actually have those thoughts. So let's just let them go by. We can't actually stop them. But we can say, thank you, brain, for the advice, not for me today, and just let it go. When we do that, our brain kind of catches on and says, all right, maybe I won't churn out so many of those thoughts anymore. And we kind of come off of that. And definitely, Joyce, it can become obsessive. And why does it become obsessive? Because it's almost that we get addicted to rumination. And I don't use that word lightly, because it does kick off a whole lot of addictive neurochemicals. And when we're ruminating, we get that kind of buzz. In fact, if we ruminate a lot, we might not even realize we're getting the buzz anymore, but we get a kind of a buzz, our adrenaline and neuroadrenaline, and the whole system starts to rock and roll. And I used to even ruminate sometimes, maybe I was just nothing to do that, walking in the street, or maybe I was sitting around and didn't have anything to do. And so my rumination would kick in, and that would kind of get me all going. And it might not be very comfortable, but it would get something going. It might get the anger going. It might get the frustration going. But the whole system started to rock and roll, and we get addicted to that. We're kind of like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do if I'm not ruminating today? So almost like our brain kicks in and serves us about what we want, but we don't really enjoy it. So the way to kind of go over that rumination is to learn to sit with herself, learn to be with herself, understands that these thoughts are coming in, descriptive, evaluative, decide whether they're useful for us. No, that thought's not useful for me today. I'm just going to let it go and then get on to the next one. And that's that's one of the ways it can happen. So Joyce says, yes, can become very addictive. Sadness, emotions, also addictive. Yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you. I'm glad it's helpful for you, Joyce, and it's great to have your feedback on it. And yes, it can be obsessive, it can be addictive, but just like anything else, we can withdraw from that. It's not so easy, but with practice, and believe me, I managed to do it. It's wonderful not being able to ruminate like that anymore. Now and then it starts here and there. It depends what our circumstances are. But when we learn to let those thoughts go, when we learn to understand that they're connected to physical sensations, and we can let that go too, and we can breathe and just participate in these lessons every day, because that's what we're doing in the first part of the lesson, is learning how to just be with that, how to be willing to experience it, how to let it go, the breathing, the ability to sit and feel it and notice it and observe it. That is what will make all the difference. So really appreciate all of you joining us today, and look forward to seeing you at the same time tomorrow. And that's it for now. Take care.
Disclaimer: this show is not therapy, nor a replacement for therapy. Should you wish to inquire about therapy, counseling, life, or executive coaching, please contact Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman at factcpfa@gmail.com. factcpfa@gmail.com. Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman is a highly experienced psychotherapist, executive business coach, and author of the book, Mind Over Terror. 3 weeks, 2 cities, 1 mission. With over 10,000 hours of experience and academic degrees in government, law, clinical social work, and a postgraduate diploma in psychiatry with distinction, Dov has the background to help you. He's also available for public speaking and corporate training.